Hey, Christian.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Good to meet you in person.
Yes, sir. Nice to
Sort
meet
of.
you. Yeah, halfway.
Yeah.
Thank you again for agreeing to participate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
So to start off, maybe you can briefly introduce yourself and where you're working right now.
Sure. My name is Rick Tafoya. I am an HR specialist for the USDA Farm Production and Conservation Business Center. The FPAC, as we call it, the FPAC Business Center oversees the administrative functions for four different USDA agencies, which include the Business Center, Risk Management Agency, Farm Services Agency, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So I have close to 30 years of work experience with USDA, mostly with Natural Resources Conservation Service, and did do some time with the Forest Service as well. And I am a former alum from NMSU.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. So if you're ready to jump in, we can go ahead and get started with the first question.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. So the first question, what do hiring personnel look for when they're reviewing federal resumes?
Okay, good. So number one, they look for a federally formatted resume. I know many students are trained, taught throughout high school and college to develop a resume primarily for the private sector using that type of format and style, which generally translates to like 1.5 pages tops. The federally formatted resume is different. It's structured a little bit different, quite a bit differently than a private sector resume. And there are samples of those in USA Jobs. But of course, we also provide samples to our partners at different colleges and universities to make them available for students. But it's really, really important to use a federally formatted resume and include as much content as in terms of your work experience, volunteer experience, education completion to date, to the point that the students have completed. All those sorts of components and aspects of a resume need to be inserted into a federally formatted resume, because that is what our HR specialists look for initially when the application comes in.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So my follow-up question to that would be, do you have any tips for a student that's applying for positions on USA Jobs?
Yeah, so it's really important for students to establish their account on USA Jobs, because all federal jobs, whether they're student internships or permanent jobs or even term jobs, all federal jobs have to be posted on USA Jobs. So it's really important for the students to establish their accounts and their profile on USA Jobs, provide as much information and detail in their profile as possible, particularly also be cognizant of the information that it asks for with respect to demographic information. Because one of the things that we look for in federal government, and certainly in USDA, is diversity. We do assessments of our workforce profiles across the country in every state, and we are still highly underrepresented in various different categories, including minorities, women, people with disabilities, veterans. So anybody that comes from those types of backgrounds, it's really important for them to include the demographic information. The other tip I would suggest is ensuring that you check the box in USA Jobs that helps identify the types of jobs that you're looking for, so that the system sends you the automated email notification whenever a job posts. It gives you a notification to let you know that there's a potential job that you might be interested in applying for. I wouldn't rely entirely on just that notification. The other tip I give students that's very important is that when they're actively looking for internships or permanent jobs, it's really important that they check USA Jobs regularly. I encourage them to do it at the time they're applying and looking for a job, to do it at least on a weekly basis, because every agency posts their positions differently and at different times. There's no real set pattern. For internships, I do know that one of the things that many agencies do is post their positions, their internship positions, in the fall. Now, that's not 100% true all the time, but during the fall semester is a really good time for students to start looking for internships, for the following summer. So they need to apply early in the fall for those types of jobs. And then probably the last tip is if the student has an interest in applying for multiple types of jobs or internships with multiple agencies, I think it's really important that the student tailor their resumes for that specific job that they're applying to. Don't take the shotgun approach where you just come up with one resume, a general resume, and then shoot it out to all sorts of different jobs and agencies. That doesn't work very well. It's more effective if you tailor your resume to the specific job that you're applying to. So USA Jobs allows you to upload up to 5 resumes. You can predetermine the type of resume you want to develop and have them uploaded and be ready to apply for jobs.
Thank you. That's a lot of good information. My follow-up questions kind of follow along that lines, and they might get a little bit repetitive. But my next question would be, what should you include on the federal resume?
All right. So again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of important content, even information and work experience that you've done in the past, volunteer experience that you've done in the past, even if it dips down into high school kind of activities and those sorts of things. As a college student, we know that you're not going to have a large breadth of work experience and things of that nature, but what you do have, you should try your best to incorporate into your resume. So again, we encourage the federally formatted resume. We don't limit or necessarily encourage students to limit their resume to 1 or 2 pages. If it goes into 3 or 4 pages, that's fine. If you have that extent of experience and other information that you want to include in that federally formatted resume, please do so. So the really important thing in a federal resume, in addition to formatting it, is think of the STAR approach. The situation when it comes to documenting and typing up the content for your work experience or volunteer experience, think of the STAR approach. The situation, what was the situation under your work experience? What was the action? What was the task that you were given to do during, as it relates to a project or job assignment? What was the action that you took to complete that task? And then what were the results? What were the results and outcomes of that task? So if you take that approach to every job that you have, or every volunteer experience that you have, or every project that you did in college or high school, take that approach in writing the narratives of your work experience. What that does is it takes the experience from start to finish. You're showing the employer the job that you did, your role and participation in completing that job, and then what were the positive outcomes and results of all that. That is really critical in a resume, and those are the sorts of things that our hiring managers look for in resumes, in student resumes.
Oh, great. Thank you. So you mentioned length as one of the biggest differences between a regular resume and a federal resume. Are there any other differences?
Yeah, one of the things that adds to the length of a federally formatted resume is, in addition to work experience, obviously the student wants to incorporate their educational experience, things that they've completed up to that point, and then also activities that you're participating in college. So if you're part of a club or organization and you hold a position as an officer in that organization, that shows leadership, that shows participation, that demonstrates communication skills that you're working on and developing. So all those sorts of things you want to incorporate into your resume as well. But also training. If you have any training certificates, licenses, things of that nature that you've completed up to a point as a student, whether it's CPR training or other type of training experience that you've received formally or informally, it's really important to list out the type of training that you've completed as well. So that'll add to the content and information of a resume, a federal resume. But what it does is it shows the employer, the hiring manager, the whole you as an applicant, the well-roundedness as an applicant, because that's one of the really important things that they look for in a student. It's not just somebody who's necessarily doing entirely well academically, which is also important, but we're also looking for students that are engaged and involved and going through the full experience in college. So they're doing community service as well as attending college and doing well in their classes. They've taken advantage of training opportunities, things of that nature, whether it's on campus or off campus. So they're volunteering on a regular basis. Things of that nature is what is going to define you as a very well-rounded applicant, and that's really important to the hiring manager when they're reviewing applications.
Great, thank you. So kind of changing the course a little bit, I'm going to talk about the Pathways program.
Okay.
What are the benefits that you can think of the Pathways program?
Well, the Pathways program was designed to provide students with practical work experience within the federal government. So most federal agencies utilize the Pathways program. We do within FPAC, and all the 4 agencies that we represent utilize the Pathways program extensively. Now, one of the things that we don't do in FPAC and the 4 agencies is utilize the Pathways not to exceed component, which is just a straightforward internship experience. The student comes to work for us in the summer, gets an idea of who we are as an agency, and gets some exposure. That's good, but we don't utilize that component of the Pathways program as much as we have in the past. But the Pathways career intern component of this internship programs, we do use extensively. And the real benefit to that particular part of the Pathways program, Christian, is that if you apply and compete for a position and obtain a Pathways position with a federal agency such as ours, and you're certain that that's the career path that you want to take, well, obtaining that Pathways position, career intern Pathways position, is as much as telling you as a student that you'll have a permanent job waiting for you when you graduate college. That's a big benefit. That's a really big benefit. And that helps a lot of students. It puts their mind at ease that they know that as a continuing college student, they just need to keep going to class, doing well, and every summer come back and work for us and continue to gain more experience. And then upon graduation, we have the ability to convert you non-competitively at that point. That's a huge advantage as a graduating student, whether you're graduating with your undergrad or master's. So that's a big benefit. And then, of course, the other benefits that kick in when you become a Pathways intern are the health benefits, insurance benefits, retirement, things of that nature. You start obtaining those type of benefits as a Pathways intern. You start gaining what we call time in service, which leads to your overall 30 years or 30-year plus career. You start gaining that time in service as a Pathways intern. So there's some other benefits that are also part of the Pathways program that are important to students that they should consider.
Wow, the Pathways program is really beneficial if you can get into it. So that leads me to my next question. How can a student make themselves more competitive to land a Pathways position?
Good question. And in the statement that you just made, that it's a really good program if you can get into it. Students can get into it. It's really important for New Mexico State students to understand that they can be very, very competitive and obtain these Pathways positions. And the number one way to do that is try to gain as much work experience as you can as a college student in some form or fashion. It could be paid work experience, it could be volunteer experience, community service work. All that builds into a strong resume and makes you competitive. So the number one tip that I can give students that will ensure their success in obtaining a federal Pathways position is to build a really strong resume. And the way you build a strong resume is you incorporate all the experiences that you're gaining as a high school student, as a college student. All that has to be built into and well documented, well articulated in your resume, a federal resume. And that resume is the ticket to obtaining a Pathways position, because that's the one document that's going to circulate through our human resources staff, which will ultimately get sent to our hiring managers. And those hiring managers have that one piece of document, that piece of paper that is your resume, that is going to articulate to them and highlight to them why you're strong and competitive for those pathways positions. And the way to do it is to build a really, really strong resume. You will get the opportunity, most students will get the opportunity to do an interview, and it's generally a phone interview with a hiring manager. But in order to get to the point of the interview, the resume has to shine in order for you to be successful at getting to that point and ultimately getting the pathway position. So although this is a national program and the pathways students, when they apply, they're competing against other students nationally, I have done this long enough to understand that New Mexico State students are bright, are talented, and compete very well at the national level. So when it comes to the Pathways program, the way to do it is to build a really, really strong resume.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. That's the last question that I have for you. There's a lot of great information. I really appreciate you taking the time to help me out with this interview.
Oh, you bet, Christian. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for doing this.